Welcome to the second part of seismic attributes. Seismic attributes plays a very important role as far as stratigraphic interpretation is concerned. We have seen in the first part that attributes, whether it is a time attribute or whether it is a horizon-based attribute, is important to understand because it plays a very important role as far as the subtle traps is concerned. We know that the easy oil is already taken out, and we have to look for oil in the traps which are subtle in nature and which are difficult to identify. We have both qualitative and quantitative attributes, and we have seen that the attributes are studied on a particular horizon, or maybe the attributes are studied within a window between two time zones. The top of the window is one time, which is the two-way time, and the bottom of the window is another two-way time. This window is considered as the attribute window where we study various attributes like RMS amplitude, instantaneous frequency, and a combination of amplitude and instantaneous frequency which gives us an understanding of sweetness. Sweetness is the most important attribute in order to understand the spots which are sweet in nature, which are hydrocarbon bearing, and which can be quantitatively analyzed. So seismic attributes nowadays is used for quantitative understanding of the hydrocarbon present in these subtle traps. We go into the seismic data, and as we see that the seismic data can be time data, amplitude data, frequency data, and attenuation data. As we see in this slide that the data can be pre-stacked, the data can be post-stacked, both for time, amplitude, frequency, and attenuation. Now, it can be, as I have told in the beginning, horizon-based or window-based. Within the horizon-based, on the time, we can have the time isochrone, which is the iso thickness in terms of time, the trend, the residual, dip, azimuth, difference, age, illumination, and etc. In window, we have the coherence attribute. In case of amplitude, it is the AVO intercept and AVO gradient, which is important to understand. The far and near difference between the AVO, which is from the near offset and the far offset, need to be understood. The fluid factor is also studied on the pre-stacked data. On the post-stacked data of the amplitude, we study the reflection amplitude, the composite amplitude, relative impedance, reflection strength, and amplitude ratio. As we go into the frequency, we have the post-stacked data. We don't have the pre-stacked data here, and we study on the horizon the instantaneous frequency, the response frequency, and also the envelope weighted instantaneous frequency, the time derivative frequency, and most recently we are also doing a spectral decomposition of the data. The data is frequency dependent. It has to be planned well whether it is a 2D data or a 3D data, because the signal to noise ratio is proportional to square root of foldage, and foldage means the number of times the subsurface point is illuminated is the foldage of the data. As the data has more foldage, we have a better quality data, but after some time there is a saturation which is reached. So the data acquisition has to be planned for stratigraphic interpretation. The frequency has to be a good frequency which is mix of low frequency and high frequency in order to understand the data in terms of seismic attributes. In terms of attenuation, we can understand that on the post-stack data we have the slope spectral frequency and slope instantaneous frequency. There are a couple of hybrid attributes which are also studied, and those will be discussed in detail in the subsequent slides, in the subsequent presentation, where we will try to understand that what is reflection is about, what is distribution, in which we have the energy half time, and we will try to see what does a hybrid attribute mean. We go to the next slide and we try to define what is an attribute. An attribute is necessarily a derivative of basic seismic measurement all the horizons and formation attributes available are not independent of each other but simply different ways of presenting and studying a limited amount of basic information. Post-stack attributes can be extracted along one horizon or summed over a window. Hybrid attributes are in integrity combination of amplitude and frequency information. Seismic attributes derived from or related to the basic seismic information of time, amplitude, frequency, and attenuation. In this case, we see a figure where we have presented a two-way time map, which is the raw time structure map taken from offshore Southeast Australia. Now, I have explained in the class that how to track an horizon. It can be a manual track or an auto track, and it can be a raw time structure map, or we can actually smooth it. Smoothened one is also an artifact which is introduced to the data, and it will be preferred to understand the raw time structure map and also the smoothened structure map and try to see how the residual between the raw seismic structure map and that of the smoothened map looks like. The time range talks about the window. The window which is considered here is 1100 millisecond to 1400 millisecond. In the next data, we see the residual map, which is created by subtracting raw and spatially smoothened horizon. The north-northwest and south-southeast trend across two 3D lines are faults. We can see the faults in red colors very easily. Blue is the up-thrown side and red is the down-thrown side. The east-west linear trends are caused by data collection irregularities. In the next attribute, we can see that this is a time scale of 10-20 milliseconds. This is called a time slice. So if you can see a time slice here, we can see a four-way closure, and this four-way closure is important to understand because that can be a probable prospect or a reliable prospect for hydrocarbon. However, many attributes need to be studied to understand whether these attributes help in understanding that the hydrocarbon prospect is filled with hydrocarbon or it has bypassed through the faults. The time structure map, as we have mapped couple of horizons, is a reflection using raw times from seismic horizon tracking, and we can see that based on our tracking, the black color faults are seen. The structure is actually bifurcated into two parts, one structure which is northwest and one structure which is southeast. The warm color shows that there is a structural high here, whereas the cool colors talks about structural lows or the kitchens. In the next slide, we can see a residual map which has been created by subtracting the raw and spatially smoothened time maps. We can see also the best fit existing fault pattern, which is northeast southwest trending, and at places they are parallel to each other. Residual map from southern Australia is prepared where we can see the linear blue features indicate graben in the early Cretaceous horizon occurred in the area around 1100 milliseconds. So we are once again proving that the attributes can be studied on a particular horizon, on a particular reflection which is correlatable, or it can be done within a window. Now the next slide talks about the residual map on the horizon. In southern Australia, the red and yellow patches indicate high spatial frequency drift over underlying bodies. We also need to understand that how the body looks like and what is the body which is there below the main focus of prospect, because that can be a zone of channeling of hydrocarbon in the prospects above. The other attributes which are of importance is coherence. Coherence, continuity, semblance and covariance are all rather similar. They aim to convert a volume of continuity is very important. These attributes operate within a time window and use a variety of mathematical approaches similar to correlation. Because the attributes are derived direct from the process data, they are free of interpreted bias. because attribute analysis has to be free of bias. If there is a bias, an artifact will be there in the prospect identification, so we have to understand coherence both on the pre-stack data and on the post-stack data. Reflection amplitude, as I have talked about, is measured at the crest of an identical reflection, by far the most widely used amplitude attribute. And RMS reflection amplitude is of importance to understand the prospect both at the time level, also at the horizon slice level. Composite attribute or composite amplitude is the absolute value, that is the summation of amplitude of reflection identified at the top and base of a reservoir or other interval. Residual attribute, as I have shown you couple of maps, is a high spatial frequency, which is the arithmetic difference between a high precision automatically tracked time map and a spatially smoothed equivalent. Deep attributes, which are new attributes or magnitude of deep, is another time-derived horizon attribute addressing issues of structural detail. On the high precision automatically tracked time surface, one time value is considered in relation to the immediate neighbors to form a local plane. Deep attribute is a combination map which combines the separate deep and azimuth attributes onto the one display and is thus an alternative approach to fault visibility. So deep attribute is used for understanding the fault, the continuity of the fault in a 2D plane and also in the 3D plane. Curvature and roughness are the derivatives of deep and azimuth and thus serves as second derivative of structure. We all understand the zero contour of a second derivative of structure is the outer limit of the structure. Edge is also known as an edge detection spectral operator using occupying 9 points, which operates like a spatial smoothing, and it helps us to once again understand the orientation of the fault. Illumination, lighting, shaded relief or sun shading is a display technique already well known from topographic and other kinds of mapping. Portion of auto track time structure pointing towards the source are also highlighted. Deep map on a particular horizon from South Australia. Note the double lineation indicating conjugate pairs of faults. Sometime you can see on the red, those are scissor faults which are found out corresponding to the grabens. In the next slide, we can see a deep map on top of a reservoir reflection which shows the arcuate faults and which help us to understand the orientation of the faults and how each faults are joined with each other. We can also identify from this map the synthetic faults and the antithetic faults. Same deep map with mutually drawn and red polygon and then used in the final mapping of top reservoir. You have seen this previously. This is a vertical section. Along yellow line, the blue horizon is top reservoir. A few sections like this help us to validate fault mapping and to understand the fault in a 2D plane and how the fault polygon looks like in a 3D cube. With this, we end the presentation of the second part of the attribute. See you once again on the third part of the attribute study in the next presentation. Thank you very much.